change my view to gallery so I can see your beautiful faces. There we go. Hi, yeah. Oh, let's settle in for a little bit of time together, shall we? So this is a talk about comfort in the discomfort. I just don't know about you. Am I the only one who's been experiencing some extra discomfort lately? Am I alone? I hope not. Yeah. So the good news is that we Agilists have got something really special, really, really special. We have ways of metabolizing change, especially in uncertain times. So that's what this keynote is about. And that word metabolizing, like you take in food and you metabolize it and the nutrients go to your body and make you really healthy. Like that's what we're doing here. That we can metabolize change in a way that is really healthy for us and for everyone. So how this is going to go is that I'm going to lay out like the really big scope of what we're up to. Then I'm going to bring that down to the specific stuff about how we use Agile and something some of you might know about, might be new for others, something called edge theory, using Agile and edge theory together to metabolize change. And then we're going to bring on a demo partner. I'm going to do a demonstration with one of the conference organizers in how you would help someone understand the edge of change that they're up against. And then we'll have about 20 minutes for Q&A is the plan. So here's the thing. I want you, if you don't have it right now, to go get something to write with, something to write on, electronic or otherwise, because what would be the awesomeness thing that might happen is that you could follow along with this keynote with a real life situation of your own, and you could leave this time with some insight about an edge of change that you're up to right now. So I love that I saw so many people get up and go get something. Thank you very much. I think you're getting a lot out of it if you follow along. All right. So dear ones, I'm about to share my screen. All right. So the big picture, if you will, is that, we're up to a big change. And we Agilists are a huge part of helping people work with this big change. And it's in the most basic way to say it, the idea that organizations and businesses are machines to the dawning realization. Now watch this language, the dawning realization, because we realize it, but a lot of people don't, that organizations are complex. They're more like rainforests. So think about a rainforest or any kind of forest you've ever been in. The idea of managing a rainforest is laughable. It's actually ridiculous. Yet plenty of things thrive in a rainforest. And there is an innate capability that nature has for metabolizing change. And I think we have it too. And our job is to get in touch with it. So that's what we're up to in this keynote. Now, let me tell you something that I learned just a little while ago. Anil Chima and Ron Gutman had this article in Harvard Business Review about this time last year, actually, and they were talking about the nature of change that we are currently in. Now, you all have probably heard about change being VUCA, or our business world being VUCA, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Well, these two guys up the ante on that. They're like, yeah, VUCA, plus 3 dimensions that we are really experiencing right now. And those dimensions are that change is perpetual. I think of it like we've all boarded the change bus and we don't have the chance to get off at the next stop. We're just on this change bus continually. It is pervasive, meaning it's not just one change you're going through or one change your business is going through. It's a bunch of them at the same time, and not only in your work, but also in your private life and in every other aspect of your life. There's probably multiple facets of change going on, pervasive. And here's the kicker, exponential. So that means that changes are going to come at us faster and faster, and the rate at which changes will come at us will also increase. So if you think it's fast now, buckle up. So, and so I just wonder if anyone's like nervous system has gotten a little bit activated. Like even me just saying it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like please no more. I can barely take what we've got right now, you know? And that is so because we human beings, our physical bodies, our level of mental complexity, we're not yet built for perpetual, pervasive, and especially exponential. But what humans are amazing at is adapting quickly. So we're going to get there. We're going to be able to definitely survive. And gosh, I hope we're going to be able to thrive as the world keeps changing. And one of the ways we can do it is by using what we know as Agilists and adding in some information from edge theory. So the thing that Agile helps us do with metabolizing change is that with Agile, we learn to work with what is actually happening. You know, so much of our industrial era history, our lineage, has us sort of try to pretend like things are going better than they really are. And because Agile puts things in short time boxes, because we inspect and adapt, we're looking at what is. So we learn ways of working with what is. And that is a really important thing for being able to metabolize change in an environment that's more like a rainforest. The edge theory addition here gives us something better even. It gives us the meaning and the depth about the change that's happening. So Agile helps us sort of on the mechanical level metabolize the change. Edge theory helps us with the deeper currents of the change. And here's the most important part, our human need to make meaning of change. You know, people always say people don't like to be changed. I don't know about that. I mean, I got to tell you, I could do with a little less. Maybe you could too. But in general, I don't mind change. And I think most people don't mind change. People mind, number one, being changed. And number two, people mind change that doesn't have meaning in their life. So this is what edge theory helps us with. Okay? So just because we know this, you know, just because we Agilists have the capability of metabolizing change does not mean that the rest of the world is hip to it. And even parts of the organizations we work in, maybe big parts of the organization, are not yet hip to this. This is an Inspire Me card from a deck of cards that I created with my husband and Deborah Hartman-Preuss a few years ago. And I love her design of this card. This quote, "Their culture thrives on black and white narratives." Basically simplicity. And so this thrust into complexity exhausts us. So I just want you to notice that even if you're better than the average at working with complexity, it's still exhausting. At least it is to me. I think it is to most. So because this thrust into complexity exhausts, we get what's on the sticky note, right? Fun training, check. Resource teams, check. Install the Agile. Who's ever heard install the Agile? As if that's actually possible. I mean, come on, right? So this is just saying to us that the world around us is still a little bit behind. We are still a little bit ahead. And that is the job of our day. The job of our day is to help people move from this mechanistic model of organizations and teams as machines and into this model of things being more alive. So let me tell you about what's been going on in our world. You probably know this, but I just want to let you know that like for with this new version 1 survey, it used to be called the version 1 survey. Now someone else is doing it. At any rate, it's the annual State of Agile survey. And the new one just came out. It's a little bit different than this, but it's basically the same, that the main thing that keeps Agile from flourishing inside of organizations are this general resistance to change and inconsistent processes and organizational culture at odds and not enough leadership participation. So the not enough leadership participation is new. That used to not be called out as a specific thing. But the rest of those things have been called out for like literally more than a decade, right? So there's a certain way that any resistance you might be meeting in your organization or even within yourself has nothing to do with Agile. It just has to do with our ability as human beings to metabolize change. Now, the part that does have to do with Agile is that it is literally Agile's job to show us the ways that our organization is not capable of getting the results it wants. Right? Think about this. Perhaps the only thing Agile is really guaranteed to deliver 100% of the time is impediments. Think about that. I mean, might that be so? And if so, number one, what a pain in the tuchus, because no one wants to look at that all the time. But number two, what a great advantage, right? Because when we look at those things and we allow the transparency of what's really happening, remember, work with what is, we allow the transparency of what's really happening to come in, then we can make a deeper meaning of it, and then we can make a meaningful shift over the edge from one way of being to the next. So this is where you start to get into action. I really want you just to think about any situation you're currently in. It feels a little bit edgy for you. You know, we have that term, ooh, that's a little edgy. Well, yeah, for good reason. That's what we're talking about here. So jot it down. This situation might be disturbing or exciting. It can be anywhere in your work or life. You're not going to have to share this with anyone. This is just a solo work invitation for you to do during this keynote. So here's the thing about this. This will tell you if it's edgy. It might be disturbing or exciting. And it might be a little bit disturbing or a lot disturbing, or on the other side, exciting. It might be here already, or it might be coming. It's okay if this change is not completely clear to you. That's part of the nature of it. And you may or may not want it. That's also something to work with, right? So everyone get a change situation in your real life, jot it down. My hope is that you leave this keynote with some insight about it. Okay. So having set the big context, let me move into some information about metabolizing change, some more practical stuff. And the first thing I need to tell you is that nothing about this territory is comfortable. But could we learn to be a little bit comfortable in the middle of discomfort? And the answer is yes. Plenty of people know how to do this. Pema Chodron, look at these books she's written about it. Oh my gosh, When Things Fall Apart, Welcoming the Unwelcome, The Wisdom of No Escape. Look at these titles, right? So there are people who are out there who can help us find calm and even meaning in the middle of tremendous discomfort. And as she says, we just need help in learning how to not run away. We just need help in learning how to not run away. So I hope what you're going to hear and experience next will give you some ways of not running away and to help other people not run away. So you've probably seen these zones of comfort, discomfort, panic. I just want to reprise it for you really briefly because they're important here. You know, in our comfort zone, we feel really good. It's super warm. It's like a fuzzy blanket and a hot cocoa, you know? And not much happens here in terms of growth, but it feels really good. So just notice that the animal of your body needs this place, and that's okay. Growth, the discomfort zone, is when something is changing, either because we want it to or because it's happening to us. And we start to get these things creeping in, like we find excuses for doing things we know we want to do. We start to feel stuck. This is where I hear, oh, my imposter syndrome's getting me. And I'm like, sounds like discomfort zone to me. If we can push through the discomfort zone, or better, if we can expand our capability to be with discomfort so that it's not so traumatic, then we can move into the growth zone. Look at what happens here. People get to acquire new skills. They get to live their dreams, find purpose. Things change in the growth zone. Lots and lots of things change at the individual level and at the organizational level. The coolest thing is that the more you can live in your growth zone, you can actually extend how big your comfort zone is. Isn't that amazing? See, this is how we adapt as humans. We can actually extend our comfort zone so that things that used to be super disturbing in the past are not that super disturbing. And I bet you've done this over and over again in your life. And you might just think of a little situation where it happened because you know how to do this. Now, here's the one we want to pay a lot of attention to when we're going through change, which is the panic zone. And the reason I want to say pay a lot of attention to it is to notice when we are in it and go, whoa, whoa, panic zone is here. My lizard brain has taken over. For me, I notice it because like this rash starts to crawl up my neck and I start to breathe really shallow into the top of my chest, right? It can show up as numbness in some people. It shows up lots of different ways, but the bottom line is that no new learning is going to work here. It's not going to happen. So if you do notice that you're in the panic zone, the job is to breathe, to remind yourself that you actually are more than likely physically safe in this moment, and to see if you can come back to growth or comfort zone. All the way back to comfort zone is just fine. So this is a useful model to reveal to people when you are helping them through change, so that you can just normalize that all of this is just the way it goes. Nothing's wrong if you find yourself in the panic zone. And if you know that nothing's wrong, then maybe it's going to be easier to get yourself back to comfort zone, or maybe you just step one step back to growth zone. So this is about monitoring your zone. And let me tell you another thing that's useful here. It's another model. It's the one I've been saying a lot, edge theory. Now, this model comes to us from, okay, get this, everyone, from a guy who is a Jungian analyst, psychoanalyst, and a quantum physicist. I think that's an amazing combination. His name is Arnold Mindell, and he has done incredible work in the world with large groups. I'm talking hundreds of people at a time, taking them through huge societal changes. He worked in South Africa during the apartheid time. He's worked on issues related to Israel and Palestine. So he's been all over the world helping people metabolize some really huge changes. And we get to benefit from his wisdom. And the people at CRR Global, who have the organization, relationship, systems, coaching curriculum, have really made his work very accessible and usable. So a lot of the language I'm going to be using comes from sort of their distillation of Arnold Mindell's work. So I just want to tell you where you can find out more. So this is a super simple and powerful model, folks. It just says on one side of the edge is someone's current reality. It's called the primary, the thing they primarily associate with. Now, on the other side of the edge is what's trying to emerge. It's usually not super clear yet. There is a little bit potentially of anxiety because it hasn't quite come into focus. We don't know what it's going to be yet completely. That's called the secondary, or the secondary thing that might be coming into someone's way of being. And so imagine someone walking along that left side of the edge. As they walk up that edge, when they get to the top and they start peering over at that new possibility of what's trying to emerge, sometimes they can freak out a little bit. That's normal. I'm sure you felt it yourself. And there are really like classic ways that people freak out or have edge behaviors, what are called edge behaviors. So life puts us at edges. So just start thinking in your own life, what are edges that you've already crossed, like even in the last year, because we've been in so much turbulence together in the last year. Here is some, simple examples. What happens when you go from being a couple to being parents, right? That's a huge edge that so many of us have crossed. What about having horrible stage fright to playing guitar in bars? My husband has crossed that edge. I've got to witness his growth, and I've gotten to witness him freak out, right? That's all normal. What about enjoying unrestricted mobility? I can go anywhere, anytime, to being in lockdown or not being able to travel to our favorite vacation spots or to travel for work, or not being willing to. So these are things that are edges that we cross all the time. These are just some everyday garden variety examples. Agile puts us at edges. Agile puts us at edges. Remember, it's from that new model, that ecosystemic model versus the machine model. And so, of course, it puts organizations and people who are still thinking in that machine model at a lot of edges. I mean, let's be fair about it. A lot of edges. Here's one. How many of you have found this one? For people go from being told what to do to volunteering for tasks. For some people, that's absolutely huge. Huge. That's a huge edge to cross. But when they do, boom, they can be in a new world. What about deciding for the team, crossing the edge to letting the team decide? That's a very big one for a lot of people, especially those who have had positional power, like managers, for example. What about avoiding failure at all costs, right? I know I used to do that like crazy. To embracing fail fast to learn. Woohoo, we failed. Hey, let's learn, So people would think I was crazy. People would think I'm crazy when I say embracing fail fast to learn, because they're on the other side of the edge. Right? And so, since Agile is coming to us from this new way of being as an emergent response to complexity, it's our job to help people cross the edge with as little difficulty as possible, I think. Not doing it for them, not making them do it, but help them cross the edge with as little difficulty as possible, honoring where they are, honoring what is, and helping them recognize when some things have happened, like the discomfort zone has shown up. So as soon as people start thinking about some of those new behaviors or those new beliefs, the discomfort zone is going to show up. And these are some examples of edge behaviors because people are in their discomfort zone. Now, the one I really want to talk about is the one that drives people crazy. And I just want to give you a little bit of sanity about it. It's zig zagging over the edge. So what is completely normal, and I mean normal, everyone, what's completely normal is someone tiptoes up to the top of that model. They look over at what's trying to emerge. They're like, ooh, I like that. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about like a mid to upper level manager, right? And they're sort of digging this Agile thing in general, but they really don't know how they're supposed to act. But they go and they work with an Agile mentor. They might get some training. They're like, oh, cool. I get to create the ecosystem where people deliver. I like that. And so they start to tiptoe over there to the other side, what's trying to emerge. And all of a sudden, they're not in the middle of all the team's conversations. All of a sudden, they're not directing people what to do. All of a sudden, they're paying attention to the bigger impediments in the organization. And you're like, yes, we did it. And then tomorrow they come in and go like, yeah, we still need the Gantt charts. sorry, can't do anything about it. That's just, like there's just, I mean, how are we supposed to really, I mean, really, I get this is supposed to be emergent, but how are we supposed to really know what's going to happen unless I can go to my boss with a list of what we're going to do when? And you're like, oh man. And you might think they'll never get it. Don't worry. They just zigzagged back over to the primary. This is what we do when it's just a little bit too much, right? So if you can work with them by you not freaking out and putting yourself at an edge, if you can work with them by going, hey, I get it. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. And then use all your good skills to help them understand the situation, help them understand how they want to deal with that kind of pressure in the future. Then you might open the possibility for them to go over to on the other side of the edge, maybe a little faster than they would otherwise. But this sort of zigzagging thing, it's totally normal. So when someone zigzags back to the primary, don't think the game is over. It's not. It's not. The game is still on. The change is still on. Okay. So this is like literally the totality of the model, right? Of course, some finer points in how to use it and everything. But that's what we want to do next, is for Alan and I to do a demonstration with you, where I'm going to be Alan's coach, and Alan's going to bring in a real life Agile situation he has, which I don't even know what it is. Guess what? Using these skills, I don't need to know what it is. And I'm going to see if Alan can get some insight. Now, here's the thing. Alan and I are going to do this, but we're doing it as a proxy for you. So the situation you wrote down at the beginning of the keynote, bring that situation back into your mind now. Go ahead and give yourself a second to do that. And what I'm going to lead Alan to do, if you follow along, I bet you might get some insights and maybe even a next action on the situation that you were thinking about. Okay. All right, Alan, I see you're unmuted. Hello.
Hello.
So what I would love, conference organizers, if it's possible, is to just spotlight the two of us so that if people want to see just the two of us, they can. All right, I needed a little break for a little water, Alan.
It's fine.
All right,
I got my own.
Awesome. So as we move into this, let me just shift gears out of telling mode and into receiving mode. So, we had a little chat about basically the steps I'm going to lead you through, not about the content you're bringing in, but about the process a little while ago. Is there anything else you need before we start, or any way you'd like to tune me to be helpful to you while we're doing this demo?
Well, so I have an edge of excitement right now. I'm like, oh, this is going to be I've been looking forward to this. But there's an edge. Excitement sometimes always has a little tinge of fear sometimes.
Yeah.
But I'm not worried about it. I've been through this before in different ways, but it's always exciting for me to jump in.
Yeah. I mean, so let's just reveal that you're trained in organization and relationship systems coaching, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Alan's been trained in this, and Alan probably coaches people through this. And I think that's an important point because it still works on us who know what, the ones of us who know what it's all about, it still works. I tell you, when my coach leads me through this, I always find some insights. So we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, good. Okay, so Alan, to start with, just draw these two lines on a piece of paper or electronic format, whatever you're doing. Just to give yourself some working room. Cool.
Yep.
So let's have a little bit of conversation about, before we get into the current reality, like in a nutshell, if this were a newspaper headline, what is the newspaper headline of your situation?
Once again, Alan and the manager have clashed.
Bum, bum, bum. Okay. Got it. Once again. Okay. So part of the current reality is, once again, this is not the first time this has happened.
Correct. It's not the first time.
Yeah. What else would you say is it just simply is so about this situation?
Um, in certain, well, for certain topics, this manager and I simply have opposing perspectives.
Hmm.
It's his expectations or perspective is really very opposite of my own.
And what is the nature of openness and curiosity in the relationship, would you say?
It's healthy.
Healthy. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the advantages, I mean, the headline, is almost clickbaity. We get along. Um, we respect each other, uh, but we do clash.
Yeah, you clash. And when you clash, what happens for you?
Um, Frustration, um, puzzlement. Like, I feel like, hey, we've gone over this before. Why is this happening again?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder and I puzzle on that. Um, it, it, there's a pressure to withdraw,
Mm-hmm.
which I succumb to from sometimes, and
Yeah,
sometimes I
so
don't.
sometimes you just go away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what does it look like when you go away? Do you just stop showing up to things, or do you clam up, or all of the above, or something else?
It's more like whatever the situation that caused the clash, I'll avoid bringing it up or dealing with it.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll still
Yeah.
interact with him and so on in other ways, but that specific instance that caused the most recent clash, sometimes I'll back away and not touch it.
Yeah, fair enough. Because this is not the first time this has happened.
Yes.
So, in the previous times this has happened, when you didn't back away and withdraw, what happened then?
Um, and we dig into it, or sometimes hits him, but often it's me that will set a one-on-one conversation and say, let's
Mhm.
dig into this, let's go after it. And generally, at the very least, we walk away understanding each other. Maybe we still don't agree, but
Mhm.
understanding is created.
Yeah. So there's something about like what will it take to like get yourself over the edge to like want to have the digging into it. Yeah. What do you think?
So that's a great question. There's motivations there around um, desire for a better new state. There's motivations around I want to stay connected to him. Not in some ways I don't. In some ways, the motivation is not about solving the clash or the problem that created the clash. It's more about, look, if I don't dig into this with him, our relationship will not remain strong.
Got it.
It will be weakened, and so I've got to keep that.
Yeah. So you're wanting to keep equilibrium. Just keep it as it is. Good enough. Just keep it like this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the minimum, right?
Yeah.
That I have in my head. It's like, well, I don't want to lose. I don't want to slip
Got it.
back to something worse. So let's at least stay here.
Yep. Okay. So let me just do a recap and then you'll see if there's anything else that feels important to pull forward.
Okay.
So like the situation is yet again clashed with the manager. What's really important to you is keeping relationship. And so because of that, you'll stay in good, good connection with this person, but not bring up the topic that created the latest clash. Yeah. And you do have experience that when you've gone further and dug in deeper, it hasn't always resolved in the way you wanted, but at least there was more understanding.
Yes, that's a very
Yeah.
good summary. That's a very
Okay,
good
great. Okay, anything else to bring forward before we start thinking about the future?
summary. Only in that because the perspective is so different. Um, we do when we dig deeper, when we go for understanding, we have to talk about vocabulary because my meaning of a word, uh, you know, might be very different for him as far as what he expects that word to mean or the actions that the word implies.
Yeah, so it gets really, what would you say? What's the feeling tone of what the conversation gets like then?
For me, it gets, I would call it fundamental. In other words,
Uh-huh.
we have to pause and say, now, wait a minute. When you said lead the meeting, to me, that means this person will do X, Y, Z, and so on. And then
Mhm.
he'll have to respond and say, well, no, that's not what I meant. I meant they would do this other thing, right? And so
Yep.
we have to kind of collapse the clash or the
Mhm.
topic and talk about the foundation of the words, and then we can build back up again.
Yeah. So what I'm getting is that this is not a short conversation.
No, it's yes, it's usually at least 20 minutes to a half an hour for any given incident, but it's
Mhm.
also ongoing.
Yeah. Got it. Got it. I don't know about you, but I just got like a feeling of exhaustion. Like, golly, it's hard to do this all the time in this situation again and again with managers.
Yeah, and I have in my head one specific manager that I work with.
Mhm.
For example, he sees value in compliance and
Mm.
consistency, whereas I see value in some creativity and emergent kind of behaviors, um, and so that's one of the places that we often have this. Whatever the
Mm.
situation we're in, he's in a different place than I am because he's like, how come this isn't consistent? How come they aren't doing it the way they're supposed to?
Yeah.
And I'm over here thinking, well, what's the best way for this particular situation
Yeah.
to go forward?
So hang on to that because that sounds like an interesting place that you could dig in because that's a clash of values.
Hmm.
And values are notoriously hard to work with because values are indivisible. You know, it's not like I can just divide off part of something I value and say, yeah, okay, that's fine, unless I just capitulate. Right.
Right.
So it's a place to look. All right. So I'm recognizing that in myself, it's gotten like a little quieter, a little slower. Maybe even a little feeling of like we're starting to walk through tar or something like that. Is it getting heavy like that for you at all, Alan? Check
Um,
it out.
well, it is. I think, like you pointed out, this is kind of like when I'm faced with a moment, is like when I have to have another conversation again. Um,
Yeah,
I bog down. I'm like, oh,
bogged
again.
down. Yeah,
Yeah.
bogged down. Yep, that's the
Yeah.
nature of this. It feels like bogged down. Yeah,
Mhm.
good, great,
Yeah. And that's
awesome, awesome that you're in touch.
very perceptive of you to
Yeah,
pull that out. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's here. So, okay,
Yeah.
now we're going to shift. So let's, go ahead and just shake that bog down off a little bit because right now it's so heavy in the
Yeah.
air. Yeah. Whew. I got to get my creativity back online too. All right. All right. So now we get to talk about what's trying to emerge. And this word trying is really important because it's not here yet. It's like if this was a movie, this is like the trailer, coming soon to a theater near you, and you don't know what the whole movie is like yet. So in this situation with this manager and just in this general pattern that you've experienced multiple times, how would you like it to be when there's a strong difference and even a fundamental difference because some of the terms are not used the same way? How would you like it to be?
So in our differences, I've come to realize that his perspective is valuable. Realize it is valuable. I've seen that it's valuable that he can show me things that I'm missing that I didn't see. Um, and so, what I would like to emerge is less about the two of us trying to convince each other of each other's values, and more about merging those perspectives into growth and other things without having to worry about who's right and who's wrong, or or have this kind of clash. I'd rather it be, let's take these two perspectives and drive forward.
So less convincing, more merging, relax the pissing contest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Got it. Everyone else who's following along, just a quick note for you. As I'm asking Alan these questions, clearly they're not about your situation, but you might find that some of these questions are useful for thinking about your situation. I realize I'm asking you to like pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time to both watch this and learn from this and maybe get some insight for yours. So do what you can. But I just wanted to re-invoke you and let you know it's possible for you to be in action here too with your own thing. All right, Alan. All right. So if it's like that, if it's like even more invigorating, actually,
Yeah.
right? What would be the upside?
Oh, I desire the energy that we spend clashing to be put into the work we're doing of supporting teams and changing the organization and all that sort of thing. If we can direct, I enjoy the analogy of energy, and I'm not sure it's fully an analogy. It's reality for me that we spend our energy somewhere over here, then we can't spend it here, some other more beneficial place. And I think he and I could kind of be a powerhouse for certain situations of driving goodness into the organization.
That's amazing. So you could unleash energy that's currently sort of bogged down,
Yeah,
and you could be a powerhouse together.
yeah.
Now, how much does he know that you think about that?
Um, for full disclosure, that question just gave me tingles.
Woo!
Uh, yeah, he doesn't know. I don't think I've explicitly expressed this desire, this emergent desire of what I expect it, I want it to be. That's
Yeah.
powerful. That's good.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you've got this metaphor of like we could be a powerhouse together. Like our clashes could actually be fuel for something better,
Yeah.
right? That's cool. So let's just like dream into it a little more, make it a little bit bigger, a little more technicolor. So, um, if this were a movie, what would be some of the high point, like played out in your mind, how this could actually work, that the two of you could be in this new way of being together more often? Like, what happens in this movie for the work that you're doing and for whatever scope, teams, organization, whatever?
Um, well, I didn't invent a movie in my head. I
What'd
jumped
you
to a
do?
movie. I jumped to a movie that already.
Great, jump to a movie.
So one of my favorite characters ever in animation is Buzz Lightyear. Um, and you know how Buzz and Woody, when Buzz finally realizes that there's power and value in being a toy instead of trying to be Buzz Lightyear or the Buzz Lightyear,
Mm.
um, then they work together, in amazing ways to get on that moving van, and then in subsequent movies to help lead the whole toy team in amazing ways.
I love it. And you know what else about it? It's so funny. They don't use words the same way either.
No.
I mean, they're like, wait, what did you mean? I thought we were doing.
So you asked what would the movie be? It's like boom, that was right in my head.
To infinity and beyond. Ride 'em, cowboy. Those two
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing, amazing vision because that could pull you forward over the edge. In those moments when you feel bogged down, you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to bring up this topic because I don't want to risk the relationship. You could just invoke that, and
Yeah.
imagine that kind of powerful duo. So let's do this, Alan, as one more step. You want to take a note? I'll wait.
I'm just writing Buzz Woody. Because I also
Awesome.
realized that in his mind, maybe I'm the Buzz who is not in reality yet. So it's
Yeah, you are the agile guy
yeah.
instead of the Buzz Lightyear.
Yep.
Maybe. Check it out. Okay, so just put yourself in the shoes that you are back in the primary, in the current reality, which is sort of bogged down,
Mhm.
sort of tiptoeing around. I don't want to bring this up, you know. Also, the weight of multiple experiences in the past. Oh my gosh, here we go again.
Hmm.
Yeah. You there in that
Yep,
energy
I
of
could feel it.
lockdown?
I could feel it.
Yeah,
Just
okay. Yeah, it doesn't take much to invoke it. So,
no.
okay. So, so let's imagine now that you are really starting to approach the idea of how you're going to have this conversation, not necessarily about this topic, maybe it would be, but it's also the conversation about the two of you being this powerhouse together. You know, how you're going to have it, when you're going to have it, all that sort of thing. Check out these edge behaviors, Alan. Is there anyone on here that would be like, oh, ding, 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 that would tell me that I'm at an edge and I might be a little nervous about this? Or maybe there's something else that is typical for you.
Um, so, yeah, hostility is not me. Um, Becoming a bigger introvert, kind of
Mm,
maybe.
mm.
But for me that looks like taking a back seat. Um,
Yeah, you talked about withdrawal. That
yeah,
was one of the
yeah.
first words you
I
used.
spend a lot. This is something I've learned about myself and something I'm getting better at. I think counteracting, but um, I used to be the quiet engineer in the back of the room that didn't say anything.
Yeah,
So uh, that's a tendency for me. So it wouldn't be fiddling with my phone. I'd fiddle with my notebook or my pen. Right?
there
That's
you go.
fiddling
So,
away now. So
so if you find yourself, if sort of you catch yourself doing things like that, that might be an indication of, maybe I'm at the edge. Maybe one of two things needs to happen. Number one, I need to relax and just go, hey, being at the edge is normal. And I still want to do this thing that's on the
mhm.
other side of the edge. Or maybe it's like, wow, too much right now. Let me come back to growth zone or maybe even comfort zone.
Yeah,
And whatever you're needing in that moment is probably a pretty good strategy to give it to yourself.
yeah, and I appreciate your focus here on me being at the edge rather than me trying to push him over the edge or
Well,
push
see
his edge.
now, this is what happens though.
Mhm.
As soon as one person in a partnership or a group comes to an edge, it actually puts the whole system at an edge. So you are eventually going to put him
Right.
at an edge when you have this conversation, but you being able to metabolize this change as well as it sounds like you're going to be able to do is going to be a really big guide for him.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Good. All right, so Alan, we're letting you off the hook, and my appreciation to you. I hope that everyone gives you lots and lots of love with their hands right
Great.
now and in the chat.
I I,
Beautiful work.
I
Beautiful
appreciate the
clienting.
opportunity, and this is great conversation. Thank you.
Woo! Sounds good. Okay, everyone. So what you would do next with someone, if you're working with them, is you would help them craft an experiment. We're Agilists. We know how to do this, right? So like I would work with Alan at this point. So I nail it down. So like Alan, okay, what are you going to do? By when are you going to do it? How will you know if it works? And the most important question, when will you inspect and adapt? You know, what short period of time are you going to do this in? And how will you stop to see how you're doing? Because these changes, we talked about these changes of going over the edge, it's not one and done. It's go over a little bit, maybe zigzag back to the primary. And then maybe next time you go over a little bit more. It's just a normal, natural, organic change process. Now, let me tell you a couple of things about how this shows up in the organizational context, and then we're going to start hearing your questions. So if you haven't put questions in, go ahead and do it now because that's coming up soon. Of course, organizations have edges too. You know why? Organizations are comprised of people, right? So the cool thing, though, is that we can help any level of an organization. Let's say it's a value stream, or let's say it's a whole department. Let's say it's even a whole big organization. We can help them identify what is their current reality and what's trying to emerge. That itself can be incredibly useful to bring some clarity into what is a very muddy situation. Usually it's muddy. We saw it with the demo that we just did. It started off being sort of muddy and stuck, and then became clearer and more exciting. So the same exact process, only you're dealing with multiple human beings, of course, to help them figure out their current reality and what's trying to emerge. So your facilitation skills need to be a little more up for that. So here's what happens. And I like this idea of how organizational change works, because inside of a big change in an organization are, guess what? All kinds of little edges. Departments that will or will not cross the edge, individual people that will or will not cross the edge. And so you can start to think strategically of, okay, if this is the big shift the organization is up to, where is a fertile place to spend time? Like spend time with the groups and people who are closer to the top of this model. Don't spend time with people who are all the way down at the bottom, or don't spend most of your energy at least. We talked about freeing up energy, right? Don't spend most of your energy knocking your head against the wall with people who are all the way down at the bottom of this model and have a long way to climb, right? Because here's what happens. As more people cross the edge, it's easier for everyone else to cross the edge. So sometimes, let's talk about this example. So maybe the current reality of the organization is the yearly budget planning cycle. A lot of organizations have that, right? A lot of organizations are trying to move to a rolling quarterly budget planning cycle or something like that, something more nimble, something more adaptive. So that's what's trying to emerge, but that is a ginormous change for an organization. So many things have to change, right? And the nature of how this works is that sometimes just some individuals change. And if you could zoom in here, which you can't, you would see that some of those little edges inside the big edges have the arrow over them, meaning some people have changed. Some people have moved over to the other side. Not everyone, but enough to move that whole function or that whole team or that whole value stream over to the new way of being. Sometimes it's done to us. Sometimes someone in power says, I've crossed this edge, the rest of you need to come. It puts everyone else at an edge, and the same thing happens. Some people will go, some people won't. And then there are some people that are just going to hang out and wait and see what happens. And they may or may not cross the edge. The function or the team or the product they work in may or may not cross the edge. So I'm offering this to you as a way of thinking strategically about how to help organizations through change. Because the more you can target where you spend your time and energy to places that are likely to go over the edge, the more it frees up the possibility for other people to go without you doing anything, because everyone else is going. All right. So I'm going to leave you with a poem. This poem is called Difficulty in the Beginning, and that's what that symbol is on the left-hand side. It's the I Ching symbol for difficulty at the beginning. This is the great message if you are willing to let it live in your heart. You need not fear change. If you get good at crossing edges, if you get good at change, then you need never fear change. You learn how it works, you know how to do it. More than that, you can now let it in. Move beyond difficulty at the beginning to metabolize change and even get nourishment from it. You never need to live in a belief system that is swamped by change or overwhelmed by change ever again. I love your attention and your presence. I can feel it. I felt it the whole time. Thank you for your interest in this topic.
Wow, that was great, Lisa. Thank you so much for that. I think everybody really was engaged. I was seeing some chats going through, and very positive. So thank you so much. I was engaged. I like have all sorts of notes, and I have my little edge topic that I'm working on. So yeah, so thanks a bunch. All right, so we're ready to go. You are going to go over to GatherTown, right? And be available to talk to other people. That's correct?
Yeah, I'll be over there in about 15 minutes.
All right,
Yep.
that's perfect.
And Perry, everyone now has the option to unmute themselves if they wanted to ask Lisa questions in this remaining time.
What? Yeah, we actually have we have a bunch of time, so let's take some time for questions and do that here.
By the way, I'm seeing all of the appreciation come in the chat, and I just want to let you know it's really gratefully received.
If anyone wants to be brave and make sure that they are truly unmuted, or wants to put in the chat if for some reason it's not working for them, let me know. But
it did work to unmute, so
excellent. Okay,
ready to go with those questions.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Alan, so glad it was useful to you. I'm seeing you in the chat here. Awesome.
I expected no less. I knew it'd be great.
Yeah, never know. Something will happen for sure, but you never know what it is.
Yes.
I
think everyone is still processing.
Yeah. So I'll just a little bit, just kind of to recap kind of the high level steps that I pulled out of it. It's really you get your triangle. It's kind of a what is the current reality, and then you as a coach, what you did, and this is what I'll be doing to myself to start with, right? Explore the current reality, right? What is the current reality? How do you feel about that? Why is that there? And then you seem to like shift into you look kind of at, or you shifted into the future and said, what would you like the future to be, right? So that and then it was kind of explored the edge a little bit, right? Is kind of those three key steps?
You got it. And then you would move them to crafting an experiment of like a behavior or a belief system that's over the edge for them currently. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just want to make a fine point about it. The reason that we start with the current reality and you're genuine as the coach or the person who's having this who's leading coaching. So let's just say coach and client because it's easier, but I know not everyone's an Agile coach. But if you're in the role of what I was doing, I'm just going to call you a coach, okay? The reason why the coach genuinely becomes receptive to the person's current reality is because until you honor where they are and how they view their world in the primary, in their current reality, there ain't no way they're letting you explore the other side with them. Right? And this is what we find is that we find resistance when we bring in new ideas to people. But if we haven't properly honored where they are now and the fact that, they're alive and breathing and paying their mortgage, they're successful as they are, right? To honor the fact that at some level it works for them, So then maybe they become a little more receptive. And then what you look for, which I do with Alan, you look for the opening at where the person starts to think of how they want it to be. Because if you keep them in the primary long enough, they'll actually get tired of themselves. And so as soon as that opening happens, drive a Mack truck through it. Be like, okay, yeah, let's explore that. And you notice my energy shifted as we moved to exploring what was emerging, the secondary. Yeah, and I even had us do an energy shift because the bog down was so heavy in this case. Sometimes that's not necessary, right? So I made a long monologue out of my simple point is honor the primary first.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So we are starting to get some questions in the chat, Lisa. I think everyone has processed now. So let's see if we could, so we have one question that had a +1 to it. So let me go ahead and read that one out to you a while from Naomi. She said that earlier in this session, we talked about the panic zone and how one of the ways you can tell you're there is numbness. How do you differentiate between comfort and that numbness, either in yourself or in observing it with others?
That is a really good question. I think the differentiation, if we're back to Alan's, like, okay, fundamental, we have to now start defining what we mean by things, right? I think the numbness versus comfort is going to show up differently in different people. And so this is the really important thing, is to just be engaged with people in a conversation rather than making assumptions about what's happening with them. So, I might open a conversation with someone by saying, you seemed a little withdrawn. I could be making that up. But as we got into the heat of the conversation, there was something going on. What was it? And let them start to fill in what's actually true versus me going, yeah, okay, they're numb. They're probably in the panic zone. I need to do something about it. Please avoid diagnosing people and moving directly to action, right? So, I think that a place to look is how, and you asked this question, how does it show up for me? How do I know when it's numbness versus comfort? Because the more you can know these states in yourself, the more you can be an able guide for other people when they are in these various states.
Okay. So let me go to another question here. I might be jumping around a bit. Oops, my chat is going crazy now. So Jason asked, what are some of the most important soft metrics you look for when transforming a team or organization? Jason.
That's interesting. I don't know that I necessarily do. So when I'm working with teams, and these days I'm working with leadership teams more than anything, like if we were just like a generic team performance coach and we didn't have Agile as the primary part of our bag of tricks, then there might be like some basic metrics that would be different. But since Agile is the primary thing, so now we're talking about primary, right? Since Agile is like the thing in the forefront for us, the purpose of Agile is to get the results we want, and to be able to deal with the complex world and still make progress, basically. So, I'm always tying things to like, what are the business results you want? What are the business results you want? And then what are the capabilities we need to build to give you those business results? And so the 5 capabilities I'm always harping on with teams turns out to be all C words. So all five C's: communication, creativity, collaboration, conflict, and change. And so if you're calling those soft metrics, which I think are really the hard things, just really, then maybe that's what, maybe I'm lining up with your definition here, or the angle you're talking about. So what I would do is work with a team to say, okay, you want X business result. The way you all are functioning as a team right now is getting in your way. Which of these 5 things would you need to improve to get X business result? So that's how I think about it. And I'm sure there are plenty of other equally viable ways to approach it.
Okay. There's another question here, and I know I'm jumping around, but it also had a +1 to it, so I can read that for you a while. How do you deal with the crowd that are neutral about the change? The ones that do not want to seem opposing or offensive, but their input is needed to move us forward.
Well, okay, so the way that a larger human system changes is by bringing out as many what they call voices of the system as possible. Not necessarily that every single person has to speak, like if it's a team or something, or an organization or a larger part of the organization, but that we want to hear the differences. We want to hear the variety of perspectives. Those are called, each of those perspectives or varieties is called a voice of the system. So it's not like you need to get all those quieter people or neutral people to talk. But I think it is important that whatever their perspective is heard. Even if their perspective is simply like, I'm pretty much a bystander, I could go either way. That's important information the system did not have 2 seconds ago, right? So I think it's important to get them to articulate.
Okay, excellent. And let's see. How do you keep the person that you are coaching from going negative towards another person they are dealing with? I admire the way it never became a personal attack on the manager.
So if it had, because that could happen, right? I mean, we're human beings. We're sort of get pissed off by each other all the time. So if that had happened, how I would have handled it is, okay, right now, Alan, what we've been focusing on is how you want it to be when this sort of clash that has happened multiple times in your life occurs. Where we are now is you're talking about how difficult this particular relationship is. Which one do you want to work on? So put it back and see what they want to do. And then, if they're negative and they're unwilling to move out of the primary, so in this case, the primary is they're negative about the relationship. They're negative about the other person. They might even be complaining about them, right? So if you cannot get them to look at the secondary at all, which is the possibility that they could do something about that, then you can just call it out. So I noticed there's a lot of complaining about this. Okay, fair enough. It's a hard situation, right? So what part of you actually doesn't want to make it better? See what I've done? I've just put them at an edge. I've been like, okay, let's look at what it is that has you stay in this cycle of complaining. And they may or may not want to go with you. And if they don't, back off. Back off. These conversations, these changes are not, let me back up and say it as a full sentence. These changes are not done in one conversation.
Okay. And there was also a question that someone pointed out that that they had posted in VUCA from Brett. When using this edge method and there is a conflict like Alan and this manager, do we ever just use a mediator, or when would that be more appropriate?
So a mediator is appropriate when people are not willing to move forward without blaming each other. It's sort of like a, I know that sounds like a super cut and dried answer, right? And obviously there's more nuance to it, but that's what I look for. When someone is not willing to explore the secondary because they're not willing to stop blaming, right? And the first thing I would do actually is just call that out. Wow, seems like you're not willing to stop blaming the other person, or you all, if I'm working with them together, or you all are not willing to stop blaming each other. There's no possibility to move forward until you're ready to move forward without blame, or just relaxing it a bit to explore what would be possible. Are you willing to do that? And so the two things will happen. One is they will say yes and mean it. And the other is, well, I guess three things. The other is they'll say no. And the third is they will say yes and not meaning, and then go right back to complaining about each other. So if the third one happens, you're like, wow, we're here again. We're here and blaming again. And you might say, like, so maybe the next step is mediation. Maybe you actually do have to separate and not work together. But usually when you guide people this way, usually they are like, wow, because people do not like to stay in complaining and blaming spirals. There might be something a little bit comfortable about that, but it's usually not something that feels good for the long term. Right? So if you give them a way that you can help guide them out of it, they will oftentimes go.
So we have about 2 minutes left. So I wanted to see if anyone else on the call wanted to actually ask a question out loud to Lisa.
Okay, so I'll jump in because Lisa.
Hi, Harold.
So there was a question that came up. It said, how can we get people to buy into Agile when they're emotionally connected to waterfall? And then in parentheses, it says ego. What I'm wondering, because I work with a lot of people that have huge egos and they just don't want to budge. How do you crack those, those egos down and kind of get them to, start listening to subservient people?
Yeah. They're the people beneath them, right?
Yes.
All right. So a couple things. One I would say is using this stuff we've been talking about. If you are genuinely receptive to what they love about waterfall and why it actually works for them, and allow them to talk about that, then that can start to create the ground conditions that would then allow them to explore a different world with you. That's one possibility. Another possibility is if you try that, and so here's the thing, if you are genuinely receptive, I'm saying this phrase over and over again, if you are genuinely receptive to what they are saying. So if you can't be genuinely receptive, you are not the person to have this conversation with them. Right? But if you can, and you've tried it a couple times and they still are not willing to budge and sort of even explore the secondary with you, that just means they're too far down that model. They're down where the edge is really, really wide, like a chasm. It's too hard to cross, right? So two things. One is, to the extent possible, don't spend the most of your energy with them. Yeah. Work with people who are more ready to cross the edge, because when that happens, it will suck people like that up that model and they'll be more willing, or miraculously, oftentimes they leave. The second thing is if they're super important, and like if this is the person that's crashing the whole thing, then you might have to have a different conversation with them. And that conversation would basically be like, hey, I know you don't want to go. I get it. Here's the thing. Here's the minimum I need to do my job to help the rest of the people who want to go. And at a minimum, I need you to not sabotage this stuff, this specific stuff. So what do you think? Are you willing? So see how I'm coming to that conversation with number one, clarity. Super clarity about what I need to do my job to help the rest of the people cross the edge. And I'm also open to what they need. I'm not saying it as a demand. I'm just being assertive to get the conversation going, but then I'm also receptive to what they say next. In the worst case scenario, you'll find out you're completely in the wrong place and you can't make the change you want to make. And eventually you'll decide what to do, because that puts you at an edge.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Terrific. And I think that puts us at time. So this was fabulous, Lisa.